Yeah. We as Citizen Science Project took part in the Action Accelerator in 2021 this summer, which helped us with expertise and training in engagement, data science, inclusion, and participation. And Open Soil Atlas as an initiative works as an open source co-learning center for Berlin and develops an educational website and an app where citizen science can become experts on soil quality and fertility. We follow the aim to raise awareness about the importance of soil and empower the people to improve soil quality also. Then we want to point out how many possibilities there would be when having a bigger amount of spaces with fertile soil. And besides, we offered workshops this summer to teach citizens how to make observations, how to test the soil, how they can interpret the results and draw conclusions out of this. Yeah, and with this we could let the people connect with their surroundings by getting to know the neighborhood and also be part of the nature. Sorry. And we as Open Soil Atlas developed from Feldfood Forest as our mother structure that actually had the aim to construct an eatable permaculture food forest in the center of Berlin. But we didn't manage yet because of some bureaucratic issues. Yeah, but that allowed us to use our capacities on this topic more efficiently. And since we are using Sociocracy as an organization method for our inner structure and to recruit and empower citizen scientists, we were asked to introduce the principles of Sociocracy within this context, which brought us here. And Kat is part of the action team that invited us. And now I'm going to present you the agenda that we have. So first, sorry. So first we are at the welcome, as you see, and in our agenda for today we use you see that first Liz is going to speak about the background of Sociocracy. Then we will have a quick brainstorm breakout session, followed by another introduction, followed by an introduction into one of the tools that Sociocracy offers. And afterwards, we will speak about the benefits of some tools of Sociocracy, about how Open Soil Atlas itself implemented Sociocracy. I will then teach you another practical tool, and we want to experiment a bit with Sociocracy. And then afterwards, Anna is going to speak more about Open Soil Atlas, and we will speak about challenges that we faced and what we've learned from this experience we made. Also, we will reflect about solutions that would have made things easier for us and how the sociocratic structure works in the context of the accelerator itself. And in the end, we want to have a quick resume of today's workshop and close this in a good way. And Kat is also saying some words. Yeah, that was it from my side, and I will hand over now to the first point, the introduction on Sociocracy, to Liz.
Okay, thanks very much to Fenja and to Kat, who supported our Open Soil Atlas project through the Action programme. You can read more about them on the references page. Yeah, so what you've become aware of when working in groups, of course, is that power is everywhere. And I chose this image because it's a fjord in Norway. But the thing about power is it tends to accumulate because people like familiarity. They tend to think, oh, this person speaks up, I'll follow them. And unconsciously, power structures tend to form hierarchies, or power just tends to accumulate. And so power is just like water. We're completely reliant on it, but en masse, it can really be destructive, as we saw, for example, in Germany this summer, to horrible effect. Nature, of course, is a model that can teach us so much, not only about itself, not only about how to survive, but how to actually structure organizations and how to work with people. And the forest is a place that regulates and distributes water very effectively. It's a good analogy to have in your mind how the forest deals with water. When it rains really hard, the rain falls onto leaves, it runs down the trunks of the trees, the stems of the plants, and it meets the forest floor at a slower pace, where it coats the leaves and the mosses and eventually soaks into the soil. So the forest spreads the water, slows it down, and then it can be stored and used by the forest ecosystem. But yes, what do humans do? Unfortunately, they want to make different, they want to use their power in a different way. So throughout history, we've destroyed forests. We've let them, they've lost their ability to maintain water, to keep water within them. And when rain falls, this is Ecuador, this is a satellite image of Ecuador, and you can see the river running down with the sandbanks and the soil coming. This amazing resource, this ecosystem within the soil, is just lost and lost to the sea. So yeah, I wanted to show that as a reason why we're soil conservationists, or we're soil builders in the Open Soil Atlas. And so we're really aware of this power and our ability as humans to destroy these systems. So in Sociocracy, the thing we like about Sociocracy is the movement sees organizations as like ecosystems. And with Sociocracy, we aim to create a structure that allows the power to be shared. So it's okay to have leaders and followers, but as long as there's interconnection and as long as there's room for people to voice their opinion and be heard. So this interconnection and communication, which you see in this image, is the vital part of Sociocracy. Later we'll talk about this in a practical way when we go into the case study of our organization. So Sociocracy the first notable uses of Sociocracy came from the Quaker Movement. And I heard about the Quaker Movement as a child because my great aunt was a Quaker, and I heard about how everybody in their meetings could talk and have a say. And that was really interesting to me because I was a kid who went to school and the teacher talked and the kids were only allowed to talk a little bit sometimes. One of the pupils of these early schools in the Netherlands, which gave pupils their say, was Gerard Endenburg, and he later used the method to manage his electrical company, which was a very long-running and very successful company, which inspired many others to take up Sociocracy as a management method. And here I wanted to include a really utopian image because Sociocracy is really aligned with several movements. And one of them would be this intentional community or eco-village movement, where people live slightly outside of the system, as it were, and set up their own communities, get their own power, make their own food, perhaps. There are many, many forms of these. This was an eco-village created in the 90s in Ithaca, which you can also look up. It's a really interesting project. They have 100 homes in nearly 200 acres of green space. The kids are able to roam free. They decided they'd keep cars out of the settlement and park them on the outside. And here, their motivation to make Sociocracy work is really, really high, because they think, you know, if we can't do it where we really have a shared goal, then, you know, we need to be a model project or an inspiration for others. So it's really worth looking at people like the Ithaca Eco Village. So other ally movements of sociocracy are permaculture. Permaculture is a reason that many of us came into the Feldfood Forest. These are the principles on which we run the Feldfood Forest and try to design our organization and our project. Non-violent communication is very useful to sociocracy and something that sociocracy often practices. And it really recognizes the needs of people and aims to support people compassionately and to share power and responsibility with others. Agile software development, can't say much about that, I'm afraid. The cooperative movement, the new economics movement. So you could also look at the New Economics Foundation if you're interested in ways in which we can have an economy that serves people and planet. And the Post-Growth Institute is also a very good example of a big multi-country organization using sociocracy to support the community economy and not-for-profit forms of business. Okay, I'll hand you back to Fenya.
Hello back. What we are doing now is we will separate you in breakout rooms, and there you can first quickly brainstorm about this leading question here, what problems you have found when working in groups. And for this, sorry, my voice is very dry today. So you will work in these breakout rooms, and after 5 minutes you will get back to us, and you have to decide somebody who can report to the big team which answers you found. And breakout sessions would start now. And so this is the meeting organization tool. And first of all, I have to inform you that we are not going to have a big discussion round afterwards or question round. We will invite you to write questions in the chat and we try to answer. And meanwhile, we give this presentation. We try to answer this. Or also afterwards, we can, when we still have time, we can answer some questions or also send you via email the answers. So, and now it's going on with the meeting organization structure. The meeting organization structure allows us to give tasks, divide tasks for people. So first of all, we would have a facilitator that in this case, it's me. Also, we would announce a timekeeper that tries to organize or look on the time that we are using to give enough time to specific topics. So I will explain you further. Then we announce a note maker that writes a protocol, because we aim to have our meetings as accessible as possible. So when we when somebody cannot participate or something, they have the chance afterwards to understand what we were talking about and to what conclusions we came. And also people who would onboard on a later episode, they can, yeah, look it up. And also people from other countries that have the same problem as we have or something, they can use our protocols to learn from our, yeah, structure or problems or whatever we're facing. And then we would start the meeting, and it would first begin with a check-in where you have maybe the chance for quick to tell the others in the group how you feel and how you come to this meeting. Also, it's good to understand the needs of the whole group and have a better overview about the group dynamics. And after this, we together set an agenda and also the duration for each point. That means, that we write down everything we want to speak about, and maybe also we collected it the weeks before. And then we can use it, but we always have time to speak about it and which points we are really going to speak about at that meeting. And we will fix a duration for each point. And it will be in consent in advance before we start talking. And also, there we fix the time already, how much time we want to give every point. And it's a really important resource for the team spirit to not waste time of everybody, and also to lead the meeting as equal as possible, so everybody has the chance to talk. And also when people who might be very shy, that when they speak, that they also have the same amount of time as others. So we try to have an eye on this. And then we start the meeting, which can lead, as long as we said before, maybe 60 minutes, maybe 2 hours. It depends always on which points we are going to speak about. And in the end, we have the checkout where you see how the meeting developed and how we leave the meeting. And it's also the point where we have an evaluation about last meeting and about the conclusions we made. And while having these meetings, not only the timekeeping helps the balance of the whole chat, but also we have this hand signs. I don't know, I think everybody knows them here because we are all kind of trained. So when somebody wants to say something new, they raise their hands. When somebody wants to hug into somebody else, then you give the hug, you hug into another person speaking. Then we have agreement, like the happy rain hands, disagreement or not so happy about something and like really disagreeing on something. And that helps a lot to understand how people feel. And also to maybe speak about some problems a bit earlier than before the problems plop up. And now I give back to Liz.
Thanks, Venya. This check-in tool is really, really useful when you start off in the meetings. And I think the feedback that came from our group is that as soon as you get a time pressure, you tend to just jump in and start working on the task. But the check-in part can maybe make the task go smoother as well. Maybe you feel like you can see more who would be suited to which role, or who's feeling more confident or less confident, this type of thing. So this meeting structure that we use in our meetings, it goes back to the values that Sociocracy has, which come from looking at the needs of people in relationships. So people need to have clarity, they need to feel like they can make a choice, they need to be recognized for making a contribution, they need to feel some agency, like what they do is actually having an impact. They need to connect with others and belong, be part of a larger organization or movement. And all of us want to learn and improve how we do things. And so having a structure where you can learn as a group is very powerful. So we have this onion here that describes living systems and human needs, and how these have been adapted into principles and tools. So so how do we use these values to guide how we work? So Sociocracy has developed these principles, and we try to use these to govern our organization in a way that hopefully builds up the organization, makes it more resilient, and makes the people within it happier to be there. So most important is this idea of equivalence, that everyone in the group has an equal value and deserves to be heard. Whenever we have a new proposal or something we need to consider as a group, then instead of thinking as two sides, we try to seek win-win. So it means we work on that proposal. We don't just say, okay, we vote on this and then the majority wins. Then we need to modify the proposal and deal with people's objections until we get something that everyone can tolerate. So decisions by a few, input from many. So within a group, we also recognize that people have their own, there are people with more experience and people who have been in the organization for longer. And so there is a tendency to appoint these people some more decision-making power, but this has to be appointed from the whole group. Everyone has to have a say on that. So if you delegate, or if you appoint somebody as somebody leading a circle, for example, the communications circle that makes the social media and the press releases, then it's expected that there's one person that would make the final decisions, and they also have a higher responsibility because it's their responsibility to make sure that the press release goes out or the event is advertised. So they take in a lot of input, but then at the end of the day, there is still this leader or driver position. Transparency, we discussed about making good notes so that others who can't always be there can follow. And then this next point is really important. This is about the tolerance around decisions. So this consensus building, or it's different from everyone saying, yes, this is my choice. It's saying what we have is good enough for now and safe enough to try. So we'll show you a bit how this works a bit later on. And of course, in any group situation, there often come tensions, and these can often be down to lack of clarity. So that might be why having written policies is important, having written roles is important, and these can really help. So it's a lot of tools actually, and it takes a while to get going with these tools, but I think they're really, really valuable. Yeah, so one of the main problems we have with democracy is that we don't really, we often ignore the minority, but in a sociocratic organization, everyone should have their own agency. And it should support people to make bigger changes than they could alone. So this also links to the non-violent communication, where everyone's needs matter And that does mean taking more time to talk with everyone. Here's an example of a vision. So sociocratic organizations tend to thrive because they've got a shared vision which guides the decision making, which allows people to tolerate some discomfort or work in order to work towards a goal. This was our Feld Food Forest vision. So to establish a self-sustaining food forest that fosters a healthy community, healthy people, and a healthy environment. And here's a picture of the Tempelhofer Feld. And at the moment, we're still in the negotiation phase with Green Berlin. Green Berlin are the management of all the parks in Berlin. So our mission is to use permaculture methods, and our aims are many and varied. There are lots of different people working in different circles towards our vision and our goals. So one of the basic building blocks of a sociocratic organization are these circles. So you see here in the middle, there's a Plenumkreis, that's in German, apologies for the non-German speakers. So that's the main meeting that happens, and it links to all the other circles. Here we have a mission circle, and the mission circle is guiding the organization, so setting the goals and feeding back to the main circle and making sure everyone's feeling like they own the goals and they're working towards them. And there are many other circles that work towards the goals. In this case, for the Feld Food Forest, there's a compost circle, and we have these 1 or 2 links, so people that go between the main circle and the compost circle, for example, so that every part of the organization is represented in this larger meeting, which talks about policy, it talks about where the organization's going, and all the leadership questions. Okay, so I'm going to hand on to Anna now to talk about Open Soil Atlas a little more. If you have questions, please write them into the chat as we're talking.
Thank you, Liz. So hello everybody, I'm Anna, and I'm going to talk more today more into detail about how about the practical implementation of sociocracy. So we will see how we at Feld Food Forest and Open Soil Atlas used sociocracy as a governance system to self-organize our community, but also how we used the sociocratic tools and principles to engage the community outside our organization. So before starting, I would like to, maybe once again clarify what we are talking about. So we are talking about the Feld Food Forest project and the Open Soil Atlas project, which are a bit of like separate, and so like Feld Food Forest is the mother project. So it's where Open Soil Atlas comes from. And Litz, I've already explained what is the vision of Feld Food Forest. So we want to grow a healthy community, but we also want to grow a forest as a place for community building, education, and experimentation. And given the problems that both Liz and Fania talked about, so like at the beginning, it's difficult to get access to this public area and to get the right to manage the area. And it was also difficult for us to get access to public data about the soil. So we were talking about public soil, and we needed to know what was the quality and also the contamination in the soil. But it was very difficult to get access to this data, and that was making like our life a bit of difficult. So we wanted to co-create a solution that could benefit both our organization, but also other eco initiatives in the city which might face the same problems, and in this way also the entire community and the environment. And that's how a smaller team within the Felwood Forest community started the Open Soil Atlas project as a sort of a spin-off project, but could also be considered as a circle of the main Felwood Forest organization. And we will see better later how these circles organization work. And what we wanted to do was to co-create together a solution which could make information about the soil more accessible to the community. And also we wanted to develop a tool to show the impact of urban gardens and eco initiatives for the regeneration of urban soil. So both Open Soil Atlas and Felwood Forest are open participatory projects, and they were born as open calls to co-create. So we wanted to build up a community around a shared vision. So the first step was to define and co-create our shared vision. So what is the world that we dream? What is the world that we would like to see in the future? And what is our mission? So what are we gonna do in order to get us closer to this vision? And also the aim. So the aim is more like, how are we going to do that? What is our overall strategy to see a realization of our mission? And what we wanted to do, what we want to do is to create a biodiverse, self-sustaining and organically growing soil data atlas enriched by citizens working together to balance and heal the earth. And with this set as our overall aim, let's now see how that was then translated into the internal organization of our team. So as Liz already anticipated, sociocratic organizations are structured in circles. So circles are basically just teams and groups of people who are working together to reach a specific aim. The important things of the circle is that every circle has to have a specific aim, a well-defined aim, and this aim also defines the area of action of the circle. Like the domain where the circle operates. And we will see later also what this means also in terms of consent and decision making. So the overall aim of the organization, as we defined it before, is served by the plenum circle, which in our case is composed by the entire Open Soil Atlas team, since we are also a very small team. And the overall aim then decomposes into more specific aims for which like a specific circle was then created. And also when the aims of these circles become too big, it can also happen that this circle decomposes into sub-circles, or it could happen that you have specific events. So for example, the organization of this webinar, here you can see Liz, Fania and me, we are a sort of circle with the aim of preparing and offering this webinar. And as Liz was saying before, sociocratic organizations are like living organisms, and every part of the system is autonomous, but it's also interdependent and interconnected. So since the beginning, we have been working a lot on setting the framework for efficient cooperation, which ensures transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability. So in order to be efficient, we make as many decisions as possible on the most specific level of the organization, so within the circle. And our decision-making procedure is based on consent. So we need to reach an agreement from all the members of the circle about a specific proposal or a specific decision. And within the circle, we need everybody to agree about what the final decision is, But the important thing is that the circle has its own agency about this decision. And if the decision relates to the aim of the circle, there is no need to get approval outside the circle. And because we are also based on trust, we gave trust to the circle, and this way circles are empowered to act, they have their own agency, and they will also have more intrinsic motivation because they are also taking full responsibility. But at the same time, it's also important to be transparent about what happens within the circle. So we ensure transparency by keeping all the working material, all the protocols for our meeting, for example, or also all the communication. They must be accessible to the entire community. So everyone must be able to know what happens within the circle and even from like outside the circle. And then periodically we also have plenum meetings where we share updates from each circle, and we discuss them with the entire team, and we also define common action plans. So this bottom-up approach was also applied for the preparation of our project plan at the beginning of the accelerator. So at the beginning, every circle was asked to plan activities that they intended to carry out in order to reach the specific aim of the circle. And for every activity, we used this structure suggested from the action team. So we had every activity has a specific key performance indicator, which is like a quantitative outcome of the activity, and also a deliverable, which is essentially the proof that this activity has been carried out and the key performance indicator has been met. The activity planned within every circle were then converged into the general project plan. And the main advantage of this procedure is that it allows the organization to co-create the project plan from the most specific level. And it also ensures commitment to the project plan because everything is co-created by the people, and the people are the ones deciding what they want to do. And so they also keep their own agency, but they are also committed to the general plan. And this structure also gives the possibility to track the progresses over time, to monitor the activity, and to review the strategy in case we are not on a good track. So like to find solutions. Very quickly, I would like to show you how we usually co-create within the team. So we have a structured co-creation procedure, which is based on the Sociocratic principle, decision by few and input from many. So when we have to prepare something, which could be like an application for funding, could be just like even an email or a flyer, whatever, we try to collect as much input as possible from the team, giving everybody the possibility to participate, and also ensuring that every input is valued and considered. And in this way, people can have the possibility to build up on each other's knowledge, and it also gives the entire team the possibility to get the best outcome possible at the end. Here is how the co-creation happens in practice. So I took an example from how we co-created the project proposal for action. So the co-creation must always have a driver. So like the person who takes care that the procedure brings at the end to an outcome. And the co-creation usually happens in a shared document, which is available online and everybody can access. So the driver of the activity set the framework for co-creation, so gives people guidelines and set the purpose of the activity, which language we should use, for example, and prepare a template. Like here in this case, we use the templates provided by Action for the application. Then people are asked to pick a color. and to write their name using that color. And this will be the color that they use to add contribution in the document. And that also allows us to get back to the author of an input in case of doubts for like clarification questions. So then the co-creation start. Here you can see in the co-creation in process, so like people adding different input with different color, but there is also like an extensive use of comments. So for example, about specific terms, there could be like discussions or clarification question in the comment chat. And when the phase of input collection terminates, the driver must process all the input and bring everything together in a sort of like final version of the document, which is not the final version of the document because it must still go through another phase of feedback collection. So the driver calls for further feedback and people give feedback. And then there is the second moment of processing all the feedback. And this is the phase of like trying to reach the concept about the final outcome. And these last two phases of collecting feedback and processing feedback could go on forever, up to the point that we have only positive feedback and we don't have objections. So everyone agrees on the document and we think that the document is good enough for now and safe enough to try. And the document is ready to go, or the outcome. And now I pass it back to Fenia for the second practical activity.
So, yeah, thanks for the input. And now that we heard about Open Soil Atlas and how we work together in circles, we will learn another tool. This consent decision-making tool allows us to integrate feedback when making a decision inside of the teams or also between the different circles. And it has not to be confused with consensus, where everyone has to agree. It is exact the opposite way, where no one has to be against a proposal to come to a conclusion. So decisions can be made quicker because it's easier to be okay with something than to agree completely for something. If a proposal has no objections, it follows the rule to be good enough for now and worth trying. It's not following an either or, but both and. So it can lead to the best decision because problems can be solved and seen in advance. It's led by effective arguments instead of the majority decides, and it leads to a harmonic group dynamic and allows a flow. As you see here, we tried, like with consensus means that everybody says yes to a decision, and the consent means that nobody is against something, which you see here in the red area. It would be the KO zone. The consensus zone would be the green zone, but we try to reach as many people as possible to be or in the consensus or in the yellow area, where they are not completely against something, but somehow okay with something, or they don't have a like big belly pain with with the decision. And now the next slide, I can, yeah. How we are doing this is that we first have a consent on a driver, and the driver will give a proposal. Then it would be followed by a question round where we clarify questions on the proposal. Then it will be followed by a round of opinions, so people can say what they think about it when they have an opinion. And then it will be followed by the first vote circle. So I would count until 3, and then people give their hand signs, and the hand signs are here. So the open hand is like a present. You share an idea for improvement, or you see you have awareness for the potential of damage, and you want to share it with the others. And this is actually the sign for an objection. Then if you don't have any objection, but maybe a weird feeling, or you're just not completely convinced, you can give this worry sign, which could also be a bit like shaking hands, but with the face down. And then otherwise, when you're okay with something, you just give your thumbs up and you're happy with the proposal. With this, we can check the group dynamic, and we can decide if it's important to get feedback, even when in the group there's no objection and everybody has belly pain. You can decide of listening to some people, or you just continue. If there are objections from participants, the objections have to be heard and will be summed up in another proposal. It's a discussion how to modify the proposal and integrate objections. That means all of the objections are getting heard until a decision has no objections anymore, and everybody is kind of okay with this. If there are no objections, then the decision has been made and can be celebrated. And then out in a later stage, it would follow the practical integration of how to do the stuff, but this is just to make a decision. Now I want to train this with you in a little experiment.
Thank you very much, Fenya. That was very nice. And I also hope you enjoy this second practical activity and get more like a bit of a feeling about what it means to use sociocratic tools, what's the advantages in terms of ensuring equivalence, but also like giving everybody the possibility to speak. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going now to talk a little bit about the challenges of sociocracy, because we're not going to hide that sociocracy also carries along some challenges. And here I'm gonna talk from our personal experience with Felfood Forest and Open Soil Atlas. And also I'm gonna say something about what we learned, so how we try to find solutions to these problems. So now you experienced a bit of how to reach consent and how to make decision, and where everyone kind of like agrees, or at least don't have objections. And in this case, it was very nice, and we made a decision at the end, but let's say it's not always so easy. Like it can be tricky sometimes to find consent about some specific topics, which maybe triggers a bit more emotions or like personal feelings that in that case could be complicated. And also it could be difficult to work with sociocracy when the framework is not clearly defined or maintained, or it's not maybe also fully implemented. There is this, so like as we are doing, for example, we are just partially implemented sociocracy. Sociocracy is this set of tools, and you can decide to bring the entire set of tools and bring it into the organization, or you can also decide to partially implement. So start with some tools and then add other tools and features over time. This can be done. There is nothing too bad about that, but this is also not so suggested from the sociocratic movement, because like tools in sociocracy are very interdependent. So sometimes it's maybe difficult to use, for example, to use the tool of consent and to not have clear membership within the circle. So then you are in the circle, you make a decision, and how can you be sure if you have heard everybody about that decision, if it's not clear who's part of the circle. And in voluntary organizations, so for example, in our organizations, we are also dealing sometimes with fluctuant participations, or maybe roles are not so clearly defined, because there is also this openness as our principle. So like it's an open community and everybody can participate and join according to time capacity, willingness to participate. So not everything is so structured, and this could maybe be a bit problematic also for the workflow and also for the group dynamics. For us, it was an interesting experience to participate in the Action Accelerator, because it was also the first time that the Felwood Forest community was approaching a paid context. So we also had like third partners and fund givers. So there was a bit more of a commitment, a bit more like also time pressure and deliverables to reach. So it was also interesting to see how the structure translated from the voluntary-based context of Felwood Forest to the paid context of Open Soil Atlas. And what we learned, solutions that could have made things easier. Maybe this could also sound a bit obvious, but I would like to highlight the importance of, first of all, the initial phase. So before start doing things, it's extremely important to plan things. So take time to organize, to understand how the different roles are defined. So who's going to take the responsibility for what, and who's going to do what. And this must be very clear, ideally also written down, so that can be like a reference point in terms of lack of commitment. And ideally also this should be understood by the entire community. So everybody should know who's taking care of what, who's doing that, what's the project plan. And yeah. And this is important to do at the beginning. But also a huge factor in implementing sociocracy is training. So everybody within the team, if we decide to use sociocracy, it's important that everybody fully understand the governance system enough to operate in it. And also the tools must be practiced and must be, like, people really must be a little bit trained about how to use the tools of sociocracy. And a tool that like I personally would suggest to explore particularly is nonviolent communication, which is, it can work both in terms of conflict resolution within the team, but it's also a very important tool for nicely formulating objections and for giving feedback. It's based on needs, it's based on feelings, and it's aimed at creating this connection between people who maybe have like contrast opinion, but like want to find a common goal and like want to try to understand each other. And this is a very efficient tool and a very also nice tool, but it must be somehow used skillfully. It must be a little bit practice because yeah, it's easy, it's accessible, but yeah, it's important to understand how to use that. And this initial phase, like planning and education, must be sometimes a bit overlooked because it is anxiety to start, but it's a sort of investment. So you invest time at the beginning and you save a lot of time afterwards. So let's see how we engage the community. So far we have talked about, so far I have talked about how we were organized internally, and now let's see how we used sociocratic tools and principles to face the community outside our organization and to build up this community of soil mates. So as a citizen science project, one of the major challenges of citizen science is always how to engage and recruit citizens. And we were talking before about that, and we will see later a bit more about our soil ambassador strategy. But when we talk about community engagement, we talk also about like not only about citizens, but also about partner cooperators, so how to network with similar initiatives and how to create a supportive network for our common goal. So in this case, for example, we have been working a lot in Berlin with urban gardens and other eco initiatives, and we were also trying to understand how we can support each other. And so, for example, we were sharing knowledge, or we were like promoting each other's event. And also very important, we were using our tools, the Open Soil Atlas soil testing methodology, to also show what is the impact of these initiatives for the regeneration of the soil. And this was creating this kind of like mutual support and connection and community as well. And also the engagement with the scientific community is very important, because citizen science is separated by like the academic science, but there could also be like a connection between the two, and both can benefit from each other. So we were benefit a lot from the support of the scientific community. They were helping a lot, like soil scientists, but also here we were like having a seminar with a class of geography, and we were talking about counter mapping. So there are many different dynamics of citizen science that we were discussing with the scientific community, and it was a very inspiring dialogue. And also very important is the engagement with policymakers. So if you want to have an impact also in political terms or like social terms, it's important to understand how you can contribute to that. So also how policymakers, which kind of information they need, what support they might need. And in this way, like having the connection, you can then create something together and make progress together. Yeah, so how much time do I have? Yeah, maybe I will go on, and I will show you some pictures about how we trained citizen scientists and how we engaged them. So at the beginning, we started with online workshops, also because of the lockdown situation, and also, yeah, it was cold as well. So we started online trainings, which were still nice. We tried to be like very interactive, even offline, even online. But this was not helping a lot for the data collection. Like we were collecting just few data. So we decided to go massively on the street, and we started organizing a lot of soil meetups. Soil meetups were just like a spontaneous gathering of citizen scientists, and they were organized to test the soil. Here you can see Katerina, which is also present today in the webinar. And we were testing the soil using the Open Soil Atlas methodology, which is composed by 10 different experiments, and we are collecting information about like different indicators about the quality of the soil, and maybe we can talk later about that more into details. And we were also explaining citizens and walking them through the upload of this information online, so using our digital entry form. And all this information was then generating our soil map, which here, I'm sorry, it's very pixeled, but you can see all the different spots where we have been tested. Here is a piece of land, and also there is Stefan here today. It's a community garden where we have been testing the soil, and yeah. And here you see also the information, like part of the information that we collected. Our soil ambassador strategy, as we were brainstorming together before we were making this decision, and James also suggested for training our soil ambassadors, this kind of like buddy system of training. And this is what we try to do during these months, to train citizen science, and not only to test the soil, but we were also trying to train them to train other people. So what happened is that participants were like taking part to a first session of our soil meetup, And in this first session, they were just learning, and we were showing them, I mean, we or whoever was the facilitator of the meetup was showing them the testing procedure. And this was the first moment. They were just like participating and learning and practicing by doing. And then if they wanted to participate a second time, they were welcome to participate as a co-facilitator. And this way, they were supporting both the facilitator for the facilitation and running of the event, and also all the other participants in the process of learning. So they had time to practice more the testing procedure, train other people, and also like learning together, learning by doing. And yeah, this is the way that we try to spread out this circle of knowledge, so empowering people also to like share the message, not just like being receivers of the message, but also share the message. And here I put some opinions from like I try to give the voice to some of our ambassadors, but since we are running a bit out of time, I would just read this last one, which I find it very nice because it highlights how connecting with people who care about like a common goal, in this case regenerating the environment, was encouraging and make people feel less hopeless about the climate crisis. And in this way, like how it's like how community building can bring more power to the people and more possibility to work together and to have an impact. Yes, I think that's all from me. This is our final dream word. And I pass it back to Fania.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And now that we learned a lot and heard a lot, yeah, we would invite Kat to say some words about how she felt yeah, having us as a participating group, and also about the webinar. Maybe you want to say some words.
Yes, thank you very much, Fania and Anna and Liz, for sharing your experience and knowledge about sociocracy with us, and the experience of running the Open Soil Atlas project as part of the Action Accelerator. So just to reiterate the, hang on, wait. Oh, all right, I'll just edit everybody out. I don't think I'm spotlighted, but I'm going to edit all of our participants out just to clarify. Yes, so I've been looking after the Action Accelerator for the last 3 years, and it's been wonderful to see a lot of citizen science projects kind of expand their knowledge and practice as part of the accelerator and as part of kind of co-learning with each other. And Open Soil Atlas really stood out for me as because of the sociocratic structure, which is very much complementary, let's say, to, or let's say very different to the structure that comes from a European funded project. So Action is funded through Horizon 2020 funding. And of course, that brings with it a lot of kind of structure, which is indeed very hierarchical. And so what we saw in terms of the accelerator and the Open Soil Atlas project was that we have different types of organization coming together and meeting. And that is, I mean, in terms of what I've been doing, it's very interesting to see what kind of frictions exist at that kind of interface, because of course, when we look at things in a broader perspective, if there are frictions between funding for this kind of project and the delivery of this kind of project, we need to smooth them out so that it's easier for non-hierarchical projects to receive support from mechanisms that have a different organizational structure woven into them. And so this is one of the reasons that I was particularly keen to learn more about how Open Soil Atlas worked throughout the course of the accelerator. And also we had calls from some of our other accelerator projects wanting to learn more about sociocracy as a form of organizational structure for citizen science. The other thing that's very interesting is how the internal structure that the project starts with then affects how things roll out throughout the project. What I'm really interested in is inclusion, equity, and diversity in citizen science projects, because citizen science projects really, like all participatory research projects, have a degree of democratization of knowledge making that is very important in challenging certain structures that have an impact on how we live with the environment. Action is focused on pollution research in terms of its citizen science projects. And it's very important to understand kind of what the impact is on citizen scientists of engaging in these kind of agentic practices. So it was very interesting to see with Open Soil Atlas that the organizational structure of the project actually promoted this this inherent agency in terms of a citizen science project, promoted it much more than you see with a more hierarchical, with some of the more hierarchical structures that can exist in terms of citizen science projects, and actually kind of facilitated this transfer of agency and agency in terms of data collection, but also agency in terms of organization and empowerment to members outside of the core team. And that's really fascinating and very nice to see. And I think there's, you know, a lot that we could unpack with that if we had more time. But yeah, I'd say I would be very interested to see, because there's a lot of, I'm aware of projects that aim for this kind of thing, but without implementing fully in a structured way the sociocratic principles. And it's interesting to see how much more effective things are when they are done within this framework where things are more structured. So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing this. It's been really, really fascinating. I'm very much looking forward to kind of continuing the conversation.